Imagine you're sitting alone in a coffee shop in downtown Toronto, staring at your laptop screen. You've been laid off from your marketing job 3 months ago and you're struggling to figure out what comes next. A person at the table next to you notices you've been staring at the same job posting for 20 minutes. They lean over and simply ask, "Tough decision?" Imagine that this question leads to an hour-long conversation where they share their own career pivot story. They ask you thoughtful questions about your interest and help you see possibilities you hadn't even considered before. 6 months later, you land a job that combines your marketing background with your passion for environmental causes, something you never thought was possible until that conversation. Have you ever struggled with the feeling you want to help and be there for people, but you also feel like you need to be an expert before you can really help them? Today on More to Life, we'll discover how genuine curiosity about others' journeys creates natural opportunities to extend hope. We've all been there. Someone starts talking about a challenge they're facing, and our first instinct is to think, whoa, I'm not really qualified to help with this. Maybe it's a coworker struggling with a difficult decision, a neighbor going through a divorce, or a friend questioning their career path. We listen politely, but then we hold back from really engaging because we assume our experiences aren't relevant enough or significant enough to really make a difference. This hesitation runs deeper than we realize, especially for Canadians. Most people consistently underestimate their ability to provide meaningful support to others. We suffer from what psychologists call advice aversion. Not just reluctance to take advice, but reluctance to give it. We convince ourselves that unless we have professional credentials, perfect lives, or have overcome the exact same challenge, we should just stay silent. Social media amplifies this feeling. We see influencers and experts with millions of followers sharing wisdom, and we think, that's not me. I don't have a platform. I don't have it all figured out. Who am I to offer guidance to someone else? We've created a culture where helping others feels like something reserved for people with titles or degrees. But here's what's fascinating about the human connection. The most transformative conversations often happen between ordinary people who simply show genuine interest in each other's experiences. A study published in the Journal of Social Psychology found that people valued advice from peers who had faced similar struggles more than guidance from professional counselors who hadn't experienced those challenges personally. Think about a conversation that changed your perspective or gave you hope. Yes, while sometimes they can be with a professional, most times they probably were informal moments when someone asked you a thoughtful question, shared their own story with you, or simply listened to you without offering any sort of judgment. The person helping you didn't need to be an expert. They just needed to care enough to engage. Canada's incredibly diverse culture creates countless opportunities for these meaningful exchanges to happen. We live alongside people from dozens of countries, various faith backgrounds, and completely different life experiences. Every day we encounter people navigating challenges we might resonate with from our own journey. even if the details are a little bit different. Yet, we often miss these opportunities. Why? Because we assume cultural or different backgrounds mean we can't relate or help. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the very diversity that sometimes makes us hesitant to reach out is exactly what makes our perspectives valuable? What if your willingness to show genuine curiosity about someone else's experience is just what they need, regardless of whether you have all the answers or not? Today, we're going to explore a story from nearly 2,000 years ago about a man who understood this principle perfectly. His approach to helping a complete stranger teaches us something important about how ordinary people can extend hope to others simply by being genuinely interested in their journey. The story we're exploring today takes place around 35 AD, just a few years after Jesus' death and resurrection. Christianity was still very new, spreading primarily among Jewish communities. Acts chapter 8, verse 26 tells us, "As for Philip, an angel of the Lord said to him, 'Go south down the desert road that runs from Jerusalem to Gaza.'" Philip was one of those early followers of Jesus, known for his practical approach to ministry. He receives a divine command to travel south from Jerusalem along the desert road toward Gaza. He has no idea why he's supposed to make this journey, but he goes anyways. Meanwhile, traveling north on the same road is a man from Ethiopia. Verses 27 and 28 describe him. It says, "So he started out, and he met the treasurer of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under the Kandake, the queen of Ethiopia. The eunuch had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and he was now returning. Seated in his carriage, he was reading aloud from the book of the prophet Isaiah." Now, this isn't just any traveler. As a eunuch, he held a very high position in the Ethiopian royal court, but was also excluded from certain religious practices because of his status. He was the treasurer for the Kandake, the queen of Ethiopia, making him one of the most powerful financial officials in all of Africa. This Ethiopian official had just finished a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, searching for spiritual meaning and connection with God, but his trip had likely been disappointing. As a eunuch and a foreigner, he would have been prohibited from entering the inner courts of the temple. He could observe from a distance, but he couldn't fully participate in the religious practices he'd traveled so far to experience. Now he was heading home, sitting in his chariot, reading from a scroll of the prophet Isaiah. This was expensive parchment, hand-copied text. Only very wealthy, educated people owned these kind of scrolls. But despite his education and resources, he was struggling to understand what he was reading. At the prompting of the Spirit of God, Philip approaches this impressive, well-dressed official from a completely different culture and social class. Everything about their background suggests they had nothing in common. Philip was a Jewish commoner. This man was an African aristocrat. Philip was familiar with Jewish customs. This man was experiencing religious exclusion. Philip spoke Aramaic as his primary, his first language. This man likely spoke multiple different African dialects. But instead of assuming they couldn't connect, Philip does something simple but powerful. As he gets close enough to hear the Ethiopian reading aloud, Philip asks one genuine question. "Do you understand what you're reading?" in verse 30. Think about how this question could have gone really wrong. It might have sounded condescending, for example, like Philip was questioning the man's intelligence. It could have seemed presumptuous, like Philip was assuming he knew better. But the Ethiopian's response reveals that Philip's tone and approach showed genuine curiosity rather than judgment. It says in verse 31, "How can I understand unless someone explains it to me? Please come up and sit with me." This moment illustrates something profound about extending hope to others. Philip didn't approach with answers. He approached with a question. He didn't assume he knew what the Ethiopian needed. He started by trying to understand where the Ethiopian was in his journey. The passage the Ethiopian was reading came from Isaiah chapter 53, which really is a prophecy about a suffering servant who would bear the sins of others. The Ethiopian was confused about whether this prophecy referred to the prophet himself or someone else. This gave Philip a perfect opportunity to explain how this passage points to Jesus, the Son of God, whose life, death, and resurrection offered hope and meaning to people from every culture and background. Then in verse 35 it says, "So beginning with this same scripture, Philip told him the good news about Jesus." Notice that Philip started where the Ethiopian was, with the questions he was already asking, rather than launching into some sort of a pre-planned presentation. As they continued traveling together, they came to some water. The Ethiopian, now understanding that following Jesus involved being baptized, asked, "Look, there's some water. Why can't I be baptized?" In verse 37. Without hesitation, Philip agreed. They stopped the chariot, went down into the water, and Philip baptized him immediately. The story ends with the Ethiopian continuing his journey home, but now with purpose and joy. He became one of the first African Christians, and historians believe he played a significant role in bringing the message of Jesus to the Ethiopian kingdom. This story reveals three principles about extending hope and how we can support anyone searching for meaning and direction. And the first is this: never underestimate the power of genuine curiosity. Philip didn't approach the Ethiopian because he was a trained counselor or a religious professional. He went because he was sent by a higher power, God. And how that happened is really a topic for another day. But what I want you to focus on is that when he arrived, he started his conversation simply noticing this man from Ethiopia struggling with something he might be able to help with. And he asked an honest question. His willingness to engage came from genuine curiosity. It wasn't his credentials. In our Canadian context, we encounter people from dozens of countries with dozens of cultural backgrounds every day. Like Philip, we might assume that cultural differences make meaningful connection impossible, but Philip's story suggests the opposite. His willingness to cross those cultural boundaries and show genuine interest in the Ethiopian's questions created space for transformation. Which leads me to point number 2. Philip met the Ethiopian where he was. The Ethiopian wasn't starting from scratch with a spiritual question. He was already seeking. He was already studying, already asking important questions. Philip didn't try to redirect his search or start over with a different topic. He began with what the Ethiopian was already curious about. This is a crucial step and a very important point for extending hope in practical situations. When someone shares a struggle with you, the most helpful response usually isn't to change the subject to what you think they should be concerned about. It's to understand what they're already wrestling with and engage with their actual questions. Philip was willing to invest time in explanation and conversation. He didn't give quick answers or simple solutions. The text says he began with that very passage, and then he explained the good news about Jesus. This suggests an extended conversation where Philip took time to connect the Ethiopian's questions with the hope he'd found in following Jesus. In our efficiency-focused culture, we often want to help others quickly and move on. But extending real hope usually requires investing time in understanding someone's situation. Philip recognized that the Ethiopian's search for meaning could be found in a relationship with Jesus. Many people today find that their deepest questions about purpose, identity, and hope find their answers in getting to know Jesus and getting to know Him personally. Philip didn't just share information about Jesus. He helped the Ethiopian understand how a relationship with Jesus could transform his life. Which leads me to finally point number three. Transformation has ripple effects. As a high-ranking official returning now to Ethiopia, his newfound faith likely influenced others in his sphere of influence. His encounter with Philip didn't just change his life, it impacted an entire region. When we extend hope to other people through genuine interest and practical support, the effects often expand beyond what we can see immediately. Someone who finds direction through your willingness to listen and engage may go on to help others in ways you'll never find out about. Philip's approach challenges our modern assumptions that we shouldn't help others unless we're qualified, that we shouldn't talk to them, we should just keep to ourselves. But remember, Philip wasn't a professional counselor. He didn't have advanced degrees, and he certainly wasn't an expert in Ethiopian culture. But his willingness to show genuine interest in someone else's journey created space for genuine transformation. The question for us is whether we're willing to follow Philip's example. In Canada, we have a lot of diverse communities. We encounter people every day who are asking important questions about direction, purpose, and meaning. And so what if your willingness to show genuine curiosity about their journey and your willingness to simply listen and engage with them is exactly what they need to find the hope they're really searching for?
In life's storms, we need a beacon. HopeStudy.ca shines Bible truth like Peggy's Cove Lighthouse, steady, bright, and free. From the Rockies to the Maritimes, Canadians are finding hope online. Will you visit HopeStudy.ca and let grace guide you home?
So how do we apply Philip's approach to extend hope in our daily lives? Let me offer you 3 practical coaching questions that will help you identify opportunities to show genuine interest to others and create space for meaningful connection. Number 1 is this. Who in your life is searching for direction, but you've assumed they wouldn't value your input? Philip could have easily assumed that an educated, wealthy Ethiopian official wouldn't need input from a Jewish commoner. But he looked past their differences and focused on the person's actual need. Similarly, we often dismiss opportunities to help because we focus on what separates us rather than what connects us. For introverts, this doesn't mean you need to become suddenly outgoing or talkative. Some of the most powerful ways to show interest are through careful listening, thoughtful follow-up questions, or even sending a simple text, checking in on somebody. The key is genuine curiosity, not some sort of personality change. In Canada, we're taught to respect other people's privacy and not be intrusive. But there's a difference between being nosy and being genuinely interested. Philip's question worked because it was specific to what he observed and offered help rather than demanding information. And so you can ask, how are you finding the transition to your new role? Instead of, what's wrong? Or, I noticed you mentioned feeling overwhelmed. Is there anything I could help with? These are just a couple examples you can use, but there are many more. The second question for you is, what keeps you from approaching others, and how could you take one small step to overcome that barrier? Most of us have internal barriers that prevent us from engaging more deeply with others. Maybe you worry about saying the wrong thing, or fear that you'll get in way over your head, or assume people prefer to handle things privately. Philip's story shows us that you don't need to have perfect words or complete solutions. His simple question, do you understand what you're reading, opened the door to a deep conversation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply acknowledge that someone seems to be working through something difficult. As author and researcher Brené Brown puts it, the most powerful words when we're in struggle are, "Me too." It's not advice. It's not suggestions. It's not explanations. It's just connection. For those who feel shy about initiating conversations, remember that questions are less intimidating than statements. Instead of, "You seem stressed," try, "How was your week?" Questions invite a response without making assumptions. The Canadian tendency towards privacy actually creates opportunities for those willing to bridge the gap respectfully. When someone does open up in our reserved culture, it often means they're really struggling and would value genuine support. Your willingness to engage might be exactly what they've been hoping for but didn't know how to ask. One small step might be maybe paying close attention to what people actually say rather than just waiting for your turn to talk. One of my favorite quotes of all time is this one by David Augsburger, which says, "Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable." Here's question number 3 for you. How might exploring who Jesus is provide answers to the deeper questions you've been looking for? Philip realized that the Ethiopian's search for answers rested in understanding who Jesus was and what he offered. Many people today are asking questions about identity and purpose and hope, even if they don't frame them in spiritual terms. You may be one of them. If you are, remember that Jesus claimed to be more than just a wise teacher. He offers a unique combination of practical wisdom for your daily life and deeper answers about why you're here and what gives life meaning. His teachings about love, forgiveness, service, and hope speak to the fundamental questions that every human experiences. This isn't about having all the theological answers. Philip started with the Ethiopian's question and connected them to what he knew about Jesus. You can do the same by honestly exploring these questions yourself and sharing what you discover along the way. What if your willingness to engage in someone else's journey today could be the beginning of the hope and the meaning both you and they have always been looking for? Would you take that step?
Hope Channel Canada is more than a TV channel. It's a movement of hope, health, and salvation. Lives are being changed each day through our programs. You can become an agent of hope in Canada, whether through prayer, volunteering, or a donation. Your actions create ripples of change. Like threads woven into a tapestry, your small contribution helps to build something beautiful. So visit agentsofhope.ca or call 1-855-4-HOPE-TV to get involved. Thank you for your support.
Suppose you're walking through downtown Halifax and you notice someone sitting on a bench, staring at their phone with a frustrated expression. Most of us would keep walking, assuming it's none of our business. But what if you stopped and simply asked, "Tough day?" That one question could be the beginning of a conversation that changes everything for that person. This is exactly what happened between Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. Philip was led by God to someone struggling with something he might be able to help with. He began by asking one genuine question that created space for transformation that extended far beyond that one encounter. Today, we've discovered how Philip's approach reveals 3 principles about extending hope to others. First, we learned to never underestimate the power of genuine curiosity. Philip's simple question, "Do you understand what you're reading?" opened doors that seemed impossible to open. You don't need expertise or credential to show authentic interest in someone else's journey. Second, We saw that Philip met the Ethiopian where he was, not where Philip thought he should be. He started with the Ethiopian's actual questions rather than his own agenda, creating space for real connection across culture and social boundaries. Third, we discovered that transformation has ripple effects. The Ethiopian's encounter with Philip didn't just change one life, it influenced an entire region and impacted generations of people who would never know Philip's name. What if the small step you think is insignificant is actually the most important thing you could do today? What if one conversation or that simple act of showing interest is exactly what someone needs to find the direction they're searching for? And perhaps the most important discovery you could make is getting to know Jesus personally, the one whose message Philip shared with the Ethiopian. Many people find that exploring who Jesus is provides answers to their deepest questions about purpose, identity, and hope. Jesus wasn't just a wise teacher or just a moral example. He offers something unique. He offers a relationship that transforms how we see ourselves, how we see others, and what life is really about. Whether your life feels overwhelming or everything seems to be going well, this one relationship can become the foundation from which everything else grows. It's not about becoming religious or following a set of rules. It's about discovering the person who taught Philip how to extend hope and lived these principles. Getting to know Jesus might start with reading about his life in the Bible, asking questions about his teachings, or just simply saying, Jesus, I want to understand who you really are in your heart. Like Philip's question to the Ethiopian, this simple step of curiosity can open doors to transformation you never expected. If you'd like to explore this further, please reach out to me on social media and send me a private message. I'll send you information about your next steps in getting to know who Jesus is personally. And so today I challenge you. Stop waiting for the perfect moment or the right credentials. Look for someone who seems to be stressed or searching, and just start by asking one genuine question. And trust that your willingness to show authentic interest might be exactly the hope they've been looking for. Your Philip moment isn't coming Sunday. It's here, now, waiting for you to notice and engage.